Edna. Thank you very much. I just love that song so much. You completely nailed it. Woo! So, welcome everybody. I'm Andrea Weatherhead. I'm a minister here at Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle. I go by she and her, and I am guessing that many people are going to be at second service because there's a barbecue. So if some of you want to come back later for the barbecue, please do. It's wonderful to see everybody here, and it's great to feel all of you online. I can feel your participation. I really enjoy how huge our community is, as Karen just mentioned. So the theme for July is Change Your Story, Change Your Life. And Reverend Abigail has done such a tremendous job all month of talking about this topic. So if you haven't seen some of her talks, go to the YouTube channel, because she talked about being a hero in your own journey. And she talked last week about how to change our neural pathways, to start to tell ourselves new stories instead of the ones that just keep going over and over. And so I was like, well, what am I going to talk about? So the topic in the website advertising says, don't let the truth spoil a perfectly good story. And I had to submit that title before I actually developed the talk. And it's a quote from my father, who was an Englishman and very ironic. And whenever he would experience an event at the same time as my mother, who was very positive, they had completely different reports of what happened. And so he would say, oh, well, don't let the truth ruin a perfectly good story. But she was very, very, very positive, and he had a jaundiced view of the world, and I'm kind of a mix of the two extremes. So, for instance, we were spring skiing one time up in the mountains when I was in junior high, and there was a 60-plus old woman at the trailhead with a man who was probably in his late 20s, perhaps. And he was helping her put her ski boots on and putting her skis on and everything. And my mom gazed across the parking lot and said, oh, isn't that sweet? He's taking his mom out for a ski and showing her the ropes. That's so cool. I love that. And my father said, oh, I thought it was her male escort. And so they had this sort of thing. And she was the butt of many jokes, because many of us who attended the same events she did not see the over-the-top positive report that she would have. So, but it didn't ever discourage her from looking to the world through her specific brand of rose-colored glasses. She was so positive. And I bring her up because it's kind of amazing that she was positive, because when she was a young teenager, her city was overtaken by the Nazis, and she lived under occupation for about 5 years. And so the idea that she would come out of that so optimistic is quite something. And I think during that time, she saw so many horrible things, that everything from her life that time forward was relative. And she connected with Spirit very closely. She knew her God. And so the reason I bring up this story about her is that we oftentimes accentuate in this teaching and in these talks people that have negative limiting beliefs, people that tell stories of negativity that stop them. But there are people that have expansive stories. And if you're one of those people that goes through life with an expansive, positive story, seeing good everywhere you go, keep doing that. The rest of us need to have that contagion, and it needs to lift us. So I don't want to always emphasize the negative when we're up here talking about things. So she saw good wherever she went. She saw good in all the people. And you know, the Christian mystic Emma Curtis Hopkins, whom some of us have read here, and if you haven't, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to give you a quote from her. But she tells us to do that. She tells us to do that. In a book called Scientific Mental Christian Practices, she says, the lily in the night looks like a different object from the same lily in the sunlight. Yet it's the same lily. So this world in which we walk looks so different by this nighttime of thought. It'll be the same world when the sunshine of pure truth strikes through our minds in its glory. Here in our midst abides the glory of God. Here all is good. There's a state of mind in which, if we get into it, we shall see what Jesus Christ called the kingdom of heaven. And judging by how my mom lived through life, she was in the kingdom of heaven an awful lot. She was very blessed. Having that perspective on the world blessed her tremendously. So I would change my title when I just said all that to, yes, let's let the truth ruin a perfectly good story, because the truth is a capital T, spiritual truth. And let that ruin our stories that are negative. You know, the song that Marina kindly sang, I asked for that song. It's one of my favorite songs these days. And, you know, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. That's a story that she's telling herself. That's a story. Right? But in the chorus, she says, I believe what you say of me. She believes because she's lifting up her story up to God and letting it be washed away by this truth with a capital T. Because that's how we need to move through the world, is letting that spiritual truth guide us. But we're not all like Mom. We're not all like Ingrid, right? Some of us continue to get wrapped around the axle by things we tell ourselves. So because Abigail did such a great job of presenting this topic, I thought, well, I'm going to go into why we tell stories. Why do we tell stories? Why do we make stuff up? Why do we make stuff up? It turns out storytelling is one of the most basic ways that we navigate the world. And we don't even know we're doing it. We just do it. And it takes a really conscious effort to move through the world without interpreting it, because it means that there's no cause and effect, there's no purpose. We would be like robots walking through going impulse, sensory, impulse, event, impulse, and it would have no meaning. And we thrive on meaning. We thrive on purpose. It doesn't suit us to just take in sensory information with no storytelling. I mean, we're so persistent about telling stories that we impose meaning on everything. If you look at someone who has a couple of dogs, let's say there's a poodle and a bulldog, and the person has these two dogs, and they have a treat, and you overhear them, and they go, "Do you want a treat?" And she's saying, "I'm so pretty, I deserve the treat." And he's saying, "Look at me, I'm so handsome." And she said, "Oh, I'm so good." And he goes, "You're talking to me?" And they do a whole thing. I mean, the dogs are known for just being present. They want the treat, but they're not putting up an argument about who's prettier and more handsome. They're just, Karen is an animal communicator. She might be able to confirm that. So we put meaning on everything and everybody. And so walking through the world without interpreting it, although it's really challenging, is a really good way to move through the world, being completely present. Taking in everything around you, the infinite possibilities of what could be going on around you. But it takes practice. It takes practice to avoid making meaning. So there's some hardwired, primitive brain stuff going on here. We tell stories because we also have this need to bind event A to event B. We weave facts together to make sure they sort of belong in a nice way. And that was a survival mechanism. So when you were in the cave, not you, but your ancestors, when your ancestors were in the cave and they went out and they heard a rustling of the grass, it made them survive, it helped them to survive to say, "Predator in the grass, going back in the cave, pronto." But it could have just been the wind. But to make these associations helped maximize our survival. So while our impulse to fill in gaps of information has helped us to make sense of it, it can also really cloud our vision. Because these patterns of associations, things that Abigail talked about last week, these cycles of patterns that we see, can cause us to get fixed in a specific rhythm of thinking. And then we can just jump to conclusions. We can misjudge character. We can sabotage ourselves very, very instantly. So there's another aspect to why and how we move through the world with interpretation and stories that I just want to mention here, because it turns out that we're hardwired to look for evidence that reinforces what we already think. That's a primitive, primal brain thing. And you see, you might like a politician's ideas, and then you say, oh, they're handsome. Oh, I like their clothes. I like the way they talk. Because what you do is you take evidence that sticks with your initial impression and you form the entire impression from the very first impression that you made. Why do we do that? It's called confirmation bias. And we do that because, according to some anthropologists and psychologists, it is a well-documented psychological experiment that we all do it, and it helped us to get along in our bands and tribes back in the day, so that even if your facts could say that the leader of the tribe is absolutely an idiot, it wouldn't help you to point that out. You wouldn't survive if you kept showing facts to someone who's declaring the truth. And so that was a social survival mechanism that got wired into us, into our primitive brains. So we have a lot that we're struggling with here to try to overcome our stories. These are automatic, primal experiences. But it's really hard to conceive of a more ridiculous design flaw in our thinking than this confirmation bias that I've talked about. I mean, can you imagine a mouse thinking the way we think? And the mouse says, "There are no cats." And then, dinner. To anybody who agreed. So we do it anyway. And you can see it right now at play in the political sphere, where people have made up a lot of stories about what happened in the attempted assassination attempt on former President Trump. Because they're too impatient to wait for the facts, they're just putting together things that they already believe to reinforce their beliefs, and it's on both sides. So that's why it's really good to be aware that these are primitive impulses that we have, so that we can look at them and then maybe monitor them a little bit and have some discriminating ways of looking at what we're saying to ourselves. Because it's also part of this confirmation bias is that if you present a fact to somebody that is contrary to what they believe, they dig in further on their belief. They don't care about what you've shown them. Again, another phenomenon that we've had for thousands of years in the way we work ourselves through the world. So lastly, not lastly in the whole talk, but just last about why we tell stories, we really have a need to impose order on the world. Because the world is really, it's random. And it's unexpected and it's unpredictable. And so when we can make a coherent story about what happens, we feel more comfortable. And the coherent story only has the things that we think in our evidence. That's our story, we're sticking to it. And this kind of imposition of order can also be at work when you're looking in the past. So not only are you perceiving the world through your lens of what you believe and reinforcing it with more evidence, but you're also remembering that way. So you look to the past and you remember things that are coherent with the narrative you already have. And that's probably one of the challenges that lawyers in court have, I imagine. But it's kind of a good thing that, just as an aside, it's kind of a good thing that we have the interpretive zeal that we have. Because have you ever sat at a dinner party and had someone who told you every single thing that happened in a movie? Every single thing? I mean, yikes, right? We don't love that. But we're wired to actually do that interpretation. One of the things that affects us when we tell these stories is that when they've been around for a long time, both culturally and also personally, they begin to resemble the truth when they're just stories. And the more they get ingrained in ourselves, the harder they are to dislodge from our consciousness. They're so old, they feel like the truth. The other day, a guy from my college days sent me an email, and he and I used to play guitar together on the beach in Santa Cruz. And I was looking forward to seeing this picture. He said he had a picture of us. And so I opened up the photo, and I looked at it, and I wept. I wept. because there in the photo was this really attractive young lady, tan, fit, smiling with really white young teeth. And I wept, staring at it. Because I had told myself for decades that I was too big, lumberjack from Oregon, to fit in with those California bikini girls and the buff bodies on the beach. I didn't fit in. I didn't feel as though I was attractive. I didn't think that I was skinny enough. And I saw that photo and it told me something very different. Very different. I looked amazing. I looked amazing. Oh, how sad I was at the years I spent running myself down, feeling cloddy and clunky. I wept when I saw that photograph because it wasn't coherent with the story that I had been telling myself for decades. So then that really opened my eyes to the present. You know, what am I telling myself now that in the future I'll be saying, God, that was so false. Why did I tell myself that? So it made me conscious of, what am I saying today? What are you saying today about yourself that you're going to say of 10 years from now is a lie? What lies are you saying? Think about that. So we need to allow Spirit's truth and a practice of stopping to consider all the information at hand, to see the lily by day, and to allow that truth of the kingdom of heaven to reign in your consciousness now so that you don't stop 30 years hence and weep at a photograph. So, just in summary, we tell stories to fill in a gap of information that we don't have. We want to navigate the world more easily. We want to survive. And we want to impose some control over our experience in what is a very, very, very changing and unpredictable world. These are all those primitive functions. The problem arises is when we don't look at these stories critically. We don't see that they're false or flawed. And they trap us into seeing things and our place in the world in such a distorted way that we need to figure out a way to actually look at those stories and shift them and let Spirit shine its light. So how do we do that? So, you know, stories happen so quickly. I was saying we hardly even know that we're doing it. They happen so quickly. We don't have a monologue, you know, that's going, that's a story, that's a story, that's a story. Oh, that was true. No, that's a story. We don't have that. They happen so quickly and seamlessly that they're just going on and on and on. So this is where a practitioner can help. I'm just going to do a little advertisement for practitioners because they don't believe your story. They don't care about your story. They just want to know what belief you have and how they can shift it through affirmative prayer and shifting your sense of yourself because you are an expression of God. You're an expression of Spirit. They know that when they're talking to you. They know that when you're telling your story. In fact, I used to think they were sort of cold and not very nice because I wanted to tell my story. I wanted sympathy. I wanted them to hear everything that led up to the thing. And they were like, nope, not listening. Come on, just get to what is it that you believe? What is it? So they're very helpful. And so if you make an appointment with one, they'll lift you, and you'll shift, and you'll walk out on cloud living in the kingdom of heaven. You really will. I guarantee it. Money back. So another way to tell that you have a story going on is you can feel it because you experience some kind of self-doubt. Or fear, or maybe you just don't even accept a compliment, or maybe you dismiss an opportunity that would have been really good for you, but you dismissed it because there's something internal about your sense of self that you don't believe is good enough. That's when you're telling a story. Whenever it's dragging you down like that, that's a story that you made up that is not the story of Spirit as you. So that's a way to look for a story and then have it healed. But another thing we do is we actually use our emotions a lot to draw conclusions about reality, right? Stories really start with emotions. And Although feelings are a very, very legitimate way to know the world, I'm not saying to disregard your feelings, but when you only regard the world through feelings, you're missing a lot of information. It's only a small corner of what's really happening. For instance, if I feel anxious speaking from this platform, I could easily equate my anxiety with unsafe. I feel unsafe. Well, that's ridiculous. This is the safest place in the world, Center for Spiritual Seattle. But I could feel that way because that's what I associate with anxiety, perhaps. Or maybe if you're angry, you think the person you're talking to is totally wrong because you're filtering through your emotions who they are, not through actual information. They're not a reflection of reality. So when you actually try to look at the bigger picture, that can really help alleviate your tendency to start a story up. I'm going to give you a little 4-step process for you to identify and alleviate story making and nip it in the bud. So let's take a really simple scenario. You texted your friend and she didn't text you back. Can everybody relate to that? So number 1, ask yourself, what am I feeling? And in this case, I'm feeling anxious because my friend didn't text me back. Number 2, what happened? Those are the facts of the situation. Okay, the fact is I texted a friend and she hasn't texted me back yet. Number 3, what am I assuming? This is where your story comes in. I don't know what I did. I must have offended her. My goodness, I can't believe it. I don't even remember the last time I said anything bad about her. I mean, maybe she heard that thing I did say, but I don't know. She's upset with me. That's a story. And then number 4 is a really important one. What am I missing? What am I missing? What's the rest of the information that I'm not taking in because I'm so emotional about my story? So what I am missing in this scenario is, I don't know why she didn't respond. She could have gone someplace where she's not allowed to have her phone. She could have run out of energy on her phone. She could have dropped it in the toilet. It could be anything. So it doesn't have anything to do with me. So those 4 steps, what am I feeling? What happened? What am I assuming? And what am I missing? Try those out. You're going to get a bigger picture of the situation and perhaps nip a story in the bud, which is what we want to do. So we're set up against these primal survival mechanisms that skew our perception, and they can cloud the light of spirit trying to shine through to lift us, because it's keeping you out of the kingdom of heaven, where you see good wherever you go. On a lighter note, I was trying to think of what I was going to talk about today, because Abigail had done such a great job. And this podium is really close to the edge. I'm afraid I'm going to fall off, although that ruins the camera, sorry. So I was thinking about summertime stories, and I was thinking about stories we read in summertime, and then my creative kind of process went to, fun, trashy novels that people read on their vacation. So I made up a list of trashy novel titles that your subconscious might be reading this summer. So just indulge me for a minute. Some of them are better than others, but so Twinkies by Moonlight, my romance with food. The Mystery of the Ignorant Lass Who Would Never Measure Up. Crime and Punishment of Being Unlovable. Endless Victimhood, Confessions of a Middle-Aged Martyr. You Had Me at Unworthy. Shame and Blame, It Was Never His Fault. To Every Season, There Is Not Enough Time. The Spike-Heeled Girl Who No One Liked. Born to Be Mild. Forever Too Poor. Lady Chatterley's Hater. The Silence of the Shy. Go Ask Alice Why She Ignores You. Peyton Place, Where All Are Beautiful Except You. The Scorn Birds. Anyway, if you related to any of those titles, if you were like, oh yeah, that's me, then you're in the perfect position to be the editor and rewrite that title. You're just the person for it. And yes, I made light of it because that's actually a viable way to reframe a story you're telling yourself is to take it to the most extreme ridiculousness and then laugh about it. It is a process people follow. So try it if you enjoy laughing. You can take some things to such an extreme. But although we can make light of stories like that, but we can also learn a lot from them, because once we become more awake and aware and at choice through monitoring our thoughts instead of being, victim to our thoughts, we can start to look at what those stories are and then learn a lot about what our values are. What do we care about? What is important to us? And we learn that through what we fear, and we learn that through what we desire. So teasing out the emotions and finding out what those are is really helpful, because then you can start to tell yourself a new story and move through the world and see yourself a different way as how you interact with others in the world. And it really prevents you from becoming fixed in this loop. Because we do live in an unpredictable, changing world, so you're going to need to be telling yourself that you are in the kingdom of heaven when you're experiencing it. All that stuff's happening down here, but I'm up here. I'm just going to close with a story about something that happened to me recently where I managed to reframe it. And it has to do with my mom, because she was at the beginning and now she's at the end of the talk, and it was a nice little bookend. But so I woke up on May 9th, and that was the anniversary of my brother's death. And I was already living 5 years longer than him. And I was sad that morning. And I was also sad because I was wanting to go say goodbye to a friend who was a mentor to me, another mother figure in my exhibit design career. She had just a really quick decline from cancer, and I got a text from her daughter that I could come and say goodbye if I could leave right now. It was a dark day, and so I went up there and told stories with her about all our antics, and came home with a really, really heavy heart. And I pulled up in my driveway, and my front door was wide open. And that's a creepy feeling. And I went in, and I shouldn't have. You should never go in. You should call the police. But I went in there. And the place was ransacked, and they'd ripped off everything, ripped through my bedroom and my study and my house. The first thing that I noticed was 3 little squares of where I hadn't dusted, where the 3 jewelry boxes were missing. One was mine. The other 2 were from my mother, who had left them to me and my sister and her children and her grandchildren. And they'd also taken that guitar that I saw in the picture that I had had since I was 16. I was in hell. I was feeling really victimized. I was feeling violated. I was feeling scared. I was feeling stressed, and I was feeling really lonely. I called the police. I did all the things that you do. I even did some deadline work for work, because I'm a Norwegian heritage, and we really compartmentalize well. But so later that evening, I decided I'm going to post this experience on Facebook for the Columbia City neighborhood, which is where I'm near, to make sure that people know that there might be people casing their houses or observing their behavior, so that they can just come in, because it was a broad daylight thing. So I did. And then hundreds of outpourings of love came from total strangers. The posts were incredible. There was one that said, "I just made some cookie dough. Can I come over and make some cookies to cheer you up?" Another one said, "I'm a musician, and I'd really like to see a description of your guitar so I can share it with all the other musicians, and we can see if they see it." Other people just wanted to help. Other people expressed their condolences. It was extraordinary. I've never met any of these people. So I did post a description of my guitar and a description of the case, which was very unique. It had lots of bumper stickers on it that were very much unique to my life, so I thought people might see that case. And one of the stickers on it that was really unique was, "God is coming and she's pissed." If they saw that guitar case, they'd see that that was mine. And a couple days later, after seeing that description, somebody texted and said, "In 1971, I bought a guitar with my waitress money. I've moved it from place to place my whole life. I never learned to play it. My daughter doesn't want to learn to play it. I could tell by your description how much you loved your guitar, and I want you to have mine." Yeah. I mean, I was like, whoop. I'm already like that because my nephew's here, and he's the son of my brother that passed away, so I'm already on the edge of tears anyway, but that one really got me, and so of course I followed up with her because what an offer, what love. And she was amazing, and she gave me her guitar, and there's more to it, but I won't go into it now. But I got home, and I put the guitar case down in my bedroom, and I saw those 3 squares without the dust where the jewelry boxes had been. And I took a big breath, and I got this revelation, and I'm sure it came from Ingrid, my mom. It said, you know, Andrea, that jewelry isn't my legacy. That's not worth much. My legacy is unconditional love. And look what you've gotten through this event. Not just through your friends who naturally are very kind, but through total strangers. That's my legacy. Forget about the jewelry. And you know, I have. I only have this one necklace that I wear all the time now, but all of the sadness and the vulnerability and the loss through all those things was dissipated because I was in the kingdom of heaven at that moment. I was released from worrying about all those material things. And so I've written a new story about that event, and I'm sticking to it because it's a spiritual truth. And I'm a happy character living in my story in the kingdom of heaven. Let's pray. And so I take great delight in the radiance and the light that shines of love and order and wisdom and creativity and kindness as I turn my attention to that source that we call spirit, that we call whatever name we want. There are 200 plus. And I take great comfort when I turn my attention to that, knowing that I can move through the world seeing good wherever I walk. And I know that this is the truth for all of us here, that we are all expressions of that divine creative source acting as us. And I accept for myself and I accept for everybody here that we can actually use that alignment with spirit as a muse to inspire our new stories, to rewrite them, and allow us to be in that kingdom of heaven wherever we walk. No matter what our primitive brain wants to do, we have it totally beaten. It is dissolved in the light. And I give thanks for knowing this truth. I give thanks for when we decide to look up, we have that capability to see the world through the Spirit's eyes and be in the finished kingdom forever. And I give thanks and I release my word knowing that it's done. We are shifted when we turn to Spirit. And I call it good, and so it is.